What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Real English here to help you get hired. Today we're going to be talking about psychometric tests, also known as online tests. I'm going to be talking about 4 key ideas to think about, when to practice, how much you should practice, what types of tests you should practice for, whether you should use free tests or paid tests, and finally 3 common problems that I've come across with clients since I've helped them with psychometric tests since 2013. And if you want a link to our recommended test provider, Job Test Prep, then you can find that link down in the description below, and if you use the code JOBREADY you can get £10 off any package. So what are psychometric tests? Basically they're just a variety of online tests that you take on the computer once you've submitted your application form. Now the Times released some figures in about 2017 and said that over 80% of Times Top 100 and Fortune 500 companies use some form of psychometric testing. My experience is that number is much greater. I would say at bare minimum over 95% of companies will use psychometric or online tests to whittle down candidates. And numbers that I have seen and also that I have researched would indicate that roughly only 1 in 5 candidates will pass the online tests to get through to an interview or an assessment centre. So 80% of people will fail online tests. So it's crucial that you make sure that you prepare for your upcoming psychometric tests. So here's 4 key ideas to think about when it comes to online tests. Idea number 1, online test practice is boring. Just get your head around it. I go through it with clients all the time. No one gets excited about online tests, but the practice is crucial, and as long as you accept that and you can give yourself the minimum effective dose in terms of the amount of practice that you're going to apply yourself to on a regular basis, then all the better. Which links into key idea number 2. Consistency is king, queen, whatever you want to call it. Consistency is absolutely crucial. When do you want to start doing your online test practice? How many tests are you going to practice a week? Is it going to be 1, 3 or 7? Whatever it is, consistency is so important. As ever, is it better for you to do 1 test a week or 4 tests in a day? Well, actually it's probably better for you to do 1 to 2 tests a week. That consistency in giving yourself and your brain the time to adapt is absolutely crucial. Key idea number 3, do not assume that intelligence equals aptitude. I always share the same story with my clients of an Oxbridge PhD student who had been at Oxbridge from a bachelor's, master's, PhD. She was also working on government funded European energy projects. She came down to see me, this was very early on in my coaching, around 2014, and I stressed to her the importance of practicing for online tests for sure before she was going to apply for some oil and gas companies. I didn't hear from her for a month, and when I did and finally managed to track her down, she was mortified because she'd failed all of her tests, and her simple response was, I'm an Oxbridge PhD student, how could I fail online tests? It's just a different type of practice. It's like the difference between riding a unicycle and a bicycle. It's similar, but it's not the same. Key idea number 4, expect to start bad. Most people when they start with their online test practice can be a little bit disheartened because they're scoring so poorly. Now this should be a clear expectation. If you start bad, then at least you've started and you know what your benchmark scores are. So don't be disheartened, don't give up, just recognize that you're not good at this skill, but with practice you will get better. When should you start practicing online tests and how much should you practice? The simple answer is as soon as possible. For most companies now, they have an automated application process, which means that once you submit your job application, as long as there aren't any clear red flags or any particular criteria that the job says must be attained, then they're probably going to invite you to sit online tests. So if you're sitting here watching this video and you haven't started practicing online tests and you're intending to start applying for jobs, particularly for graduate jobs, you should start practicing now. My advice, practice 1 test a day. that's roughly about 30 minutes. It's not going to take you that long to get pretty good at online tests. I'd say a month of doing that and you're going to see a massive difference in your scores and your ability to pass online tests and feel confident while doing them. But if you feel like one test a day is too much, then take it down a notch. But I'd certainly say that a minimum of 3 tests a week, and make sure you diarise that practice and make it systematic so that you know on Monday, Wednesday and Friday you're going to be practicing your tests. Here's a simple 4-step process to think about practicing. Number 1, practice one type of each test. So whether that be numerical, logical, SJT, verbal if it applies to you. Get your benchmark scores, find your weakest area. This is the one that you really want to start on first. And ideally the score that you're aiming for is 70%. In real life it's going to be more like 80%. Some tests do score higher, but you're looking for 70 to 80%. And before you take your real online tests, you want to be getting at least 70% in that test 3 times. So that's 3 different numerical tests. You want to consistently get at least 70% or 7 out of 10, and then I would consider you to be ready to take the real test. So should you pay for an online test provider, or should you just go and find some free tests? Well, we're going to leave a ton of useful links down in the description below. One of them that's super useful is a provider that we love, is Assessment Day, and they provide 2 free tests per different type of test. I don't personally recommend taking free tests, and I'm going to explain to you why. For most types of tests, you're going to need to practice multiple times. I would say minimum 5 times per type of test. It's probably going to be more like 10. Also, you're going to want really clear explanations, up-to-date questions, which are of the same level of difficulty of tests that you can expect to take in real life. And also you're going to want to take different types of tests, different styles, maybe different graphics. So you're going to want a wide variety. And the other thing to think about is you're going to want something that's all in one place and that's easy for you when you go there to be as frictionless as possible so that you can start taking tests. Free tests do not satisfy any of those criteria. Now, Job Test Prep has been around since 1992. We've used them with all of our clients since we've been going, since 2020, and we highly recommend them. They've got over 16,000 different questions, a really easy to use platform. They've got up-to-date tests from lots of different companies. They're constantly working on their tests. They are, to my knowledge, the oldest online test provider around, providing tests from all of the big firms like SLHL, Connexa, Cubics, and it's really not a lot of money. I think it's £60 for a 3-month subscription, and if you use the code JOBREADY then you can get £10 off if you go and click down in the link in the description below. But more so than this, just think about the amount of time that gets wasted when you look for free tests. You're going to have to go to multiple different websites. You're not going to know the standard of test. Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it like those joke IQ tests that you take that say, wow, you've got an IQ of 700. You must be a genius because it's too easy or it's too difficult. So in my books, it's well worth the money and a very small investment, because that £60 that you invest into an online test provider is going to equal a 5-figure salary at the end of it, or you passing through the stage for whatever job that you're applying for. What different types of tests are they, and what types of tests should you practice? So there are really 6 big online test providers, but the 2 that we're really interested in are SHL and Connexa. They probably make up 80 to 90% of the types of tests that you come across, and you've got your Savile, your Cubics, your QT, and a couple of other providers. But SHL are by far and away the biggest provider of online tests for large companies around the world. So what are the different types of tests? Well, realistically there are 4, which is numerical, logical, verbal and situational judgment style tests. Numerical are going to include some sort of graph or table some kind of multiple choice question, and you're going to have to complete that question in 60 seconds and do some form of basic calculation. Logical involves pattern recognition, so you've got a couple of different shapes and say what shape follows afterwards. This is very much structured for people where English is not their first language, and you're going to have 30 seconds to complete each of these questions. Situational judgment tests, they tend to come in two distinct categories. Both of them involve some type of situation from work and then an expected response. You'll generally have 5 responses based upon the situation. One type of test, you'll just have to pick the best and the worst. And another type of test, which tends to be more difficult and people struggle with, is to rank the responses in order, 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. And finally, you'll have verbal style tests, which come in lots of different shapes and forms, but a lot of these tend to be based upon a passage which is given to you, a statement, and you say, is this statement true, false, or cannot say. So for SJT and verbal tests and numerical tests, you tend to get a minute to respond, and logical tests tend to be 30 seconds. But for our money, what we tend to find is that there's not a lot of point in practicing verbal tests. Particularly if you are a non-native English speaker, these tend to be the most difficult types of tests for you, particularly based upon the nuance of the English language. That's why a lot of international students as well struggle with situational judgment tests. If I was going to pick 3, I would say definitely numerical, logical, situational judgment tests. And if you find, based upon your research, when you're just trying to look up what types of online tests you're going to get, if you get verbal tests come up, which I would say is going to be quite rare, then you can do your practice. Time is of the essence. You want to make sure that you're putting in maximum work with minimum time. So I would leave verbal test practice until you are sure that you are going to get this type of test. Let's not forget about game-based assessment. Probably the best and most well-known game-based assessment is PwC's Pop the Balloon game. These have been around for a couple of years now. They came about with Arctic Shores, who kind of came on the scene in about 2017, and these are much more difficult to prepare for because essentially they require practice and it's difficult to find. I certainly recommend graduates first. A lot of universities in the UK already provide this to their students. I like them for their game-based assessment. We've also put the link down in the description below for 6 different places that you can find free tests where you can practice, including Arctic Shores. Also highly recommend the Debut app, who were one of the first apps to come out and be used for game-based assessments by employers. But these are difficult to prepare for, and check out one of those links in the description below so you can kind of get your head around how to practice for game-based assessments. Finally, let's talk about 3 common problems that I see people having with online tests, particularly if you're watching this and you find that you're failing often, you're finding it difficult to move past this stage to get on and get that interview. And there are 3 problems that I'm going to go through. Biggest problem, quite simply, is just lack of practice. As I've already outlined, you want to be practicing, if you can, 1 test a day, 3 tests a week. There are 3 different main types of tests that we want to concentrate on, and I would say you'd want to practice them 5, if not 10 times minimum. So you're talking about 15 to 30 tests that you want to do before you're taking the real test. You want to make sure that you're getting at least 70% 3 times in a row. So if you're watching this, a good question to ask yourself is, well, have I practiced at least 15 tests? Can I practice some more? If you find that you're failing, probably you're not practicing enough. And if you are practicing, make sure you take the time to read the explanations from the online test provider. If you're using a provider that's not providing clear explanations, then check out the link in the description below to get a job test prep account and use the code JOBREADY for £10 off. That's one of the reasons why we love job test prep, because their explanations are so clear and so easy to understand. There's no point in making a mistake if you're not going to learn from that mistake. The second big problem that I find is that people really struggle with the timings, particularly with logical tests. To only have 30 seconds to answer a question is really quite difficult, especially if you're a student where you're given quite a lot of time to answer questions, write essays, prepare coursework, and so on and so forth. This problem is easily overcome through the solution for problem number 1, which is more practice. More practice, you will adjust, you will get used to the time, and you can make adjustments each time round. So maybe you don't have a piece of paper to hand to do workings out, you don't understand how to do the calculations, so you go and use something like Khan Academy. You have a calculator right there that you can use with a big face, so it's easy to see the numbers. And the final problem is language. Now this is particularly relevant if English is not your first language. A lot of international students do struggle with SJT and verbal tests. One thing I would say to you is have a dictionary to hand. Make sure you're not getting too caught up in the words, and also use a thesaurus as well. Now this might seem a little bit too much to go through, but a lot of the language will repeat itself, particularly in situational judgments test style questions, where you might be coming across nouns and verbs that you don't quite understand, or situations and technical language that you haven't come across. Just make a note of those words, make sure you look them up. Look, if you're here and you're studying a degree, you'll certainly be able to overcome these language problems. But again, just like the solutions for problem number 1 and problem number 2, this comes from practice and accurate self-assessment. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos. Like this video, drop us a comment down below and let us know if this video was helpful. What's the hardest online test that you've ever had? What are the problems that you're having with online tests? And we will see you in the next video. Good luck. Cue a blooper roll.
Yeah, boy.
Today our link in the description below is a little bit something tests. Intelligence equals
perfect. It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
in 2 distinct categories. One will be you're going to have some sort of situation. That's the advice that